tree, any tree we casually pass by every day. What is its value? From a purely scientific perspective, a tree provides a variety of benefits, as shown for a mature pin oak. Trees can create a public environment or a private one.
It's really a nice contrast in the summer when you come out of that really hot field with direct sunlight and go into that area that's covered, that's canopied by the trees, with the sun coming through, a little chiaroscuro sun coming through the trees.
But there can also be hidden hazards. The town of Roosevelt, New Jersey has a great many trees. In fact, it has the highest proportion of them of all the towns of Monmouth County. This is the direct and intended consequence of the original design of this 1930s planned community. In order to better understand the composition and health of its trees, the borough officials of Roosevelt commissioned 2 forestry consultants to research trees on public land, one to survey street trees and trees in other public areas, and the other to survey forested land. The latter, the forested or open spaces, are shown in yellow on this map. Rochdale Avenue is the straight vertical line near the center. This portion of the study was conducted by Heather Gracie of the firm Gracie Harrington.
And when we do this inventory, we're looking at trees, we're looking at understory, whether it be native understory, non-native plants, which is a continual problem in our state. So with that baseline study, we can work with the borough on prioritizing where they might want to put their efforts in management. You know, what are the important areas? What's the overall health of the forest? And having a baseline study of what you know you have, you can base some of your management decisions on that. A healthy forest is better for water quality, it's better for carbon sequestration. You want to keep that going. So we're looking at not only forest structure and health, but we're looking at diversity. We're looking at things like wildlife components, or maybe legacy trees out there, certain habitat trees that we want to make sure that the borough can recognize to maintain those areas. You look at a forest and most people say, well, the forest has always been that way. Forests change. They change naturally, they change because of disturbances like hurricanes and fire. When we inventory a woodlot, we go out and we do point sampling throughout the forest. With that information, we're able to delineate the different forest cover types or forest stands in this case.
Asked how a sample point is determined.
It's just a random sampling point in terms of the distance we go and the different, as we pick up different species of trees, we want to make sure they're all represented.
The central tree of the sample plot is tagged. Marked with paint, the location of the tagged tree at the center of the sample point is recorded on the device.
Roughly, when we do a prism point sample, it roughly takes in about a tenth of an acre. It's a piece of glass, and if you look through it, it's graded. So I can determine what trees are in the point sample and what trees are out. And what we're doing is we're not only recording the size of the trees, but we're also recording the quality. Because you're getting trees that are big, that are far away, and trees that are bigger that are also in, but little trees close by would be in where they may not be in far away. Mm-hmm. So that makes sense. So it's giving us a good representation of what we have in a very, very efficient way. And it works. And then once we get all that information, we'll put it into our database, and out will come out things like tree stocking, stem density, the species composition, like percentage, like this might be 30% red maple, 40% sweet gum, there may be 10% beech. So we'll know what these variables are. If we know we have a stand, for example, with the beech leaf disease, where we have 10% beech, like, well, is there anything we can do about it? Can we cut some of the wood for firewood now, or just let Mother Nature, take its course? So it gives you those, it gets you thinking, it gets you through the process of figuring out what, if anything, you're going to do. So we measure things such as the diameter of the trees, the heights of certain dominant trees. We're looking at species of trees. So we have all that information. So once we get that information about trees, we put those into our database, and with that comes a lot of information about forest density, forest stocking, number of trees per acre based on size, based on species. We also have a component for wood volume, whether it be board footage or cordwood. So we know a lot about the forest, when we're done. We also look at things like quality trees versus poor quality trees, whether they be diseased. We did see some dead oak out here. That might be a component of bacterial leaf scorch. We don't know. But we monitor those things. In addition to looking at trees, the forest encompasses many different canopy levels. We look at mid-story canopy, whether it be taller shrubs, and we also look at the lower, more herbaceous, low shrub habitat. Of course, every point gets a tally sheet, and then at the end we'll combine some of the tally sheets with that information when we find similarities, meaning common areas that we would call forest stands, because they're similar in composition, age, understory variables, and the like. So we'll have a nice conceptual map where the town can look at, and they will know, well, this is stand 1, and this is maturing sweet gum and oak, and this is stand 2, this is maturing sweet gum and maple. So we'll have all that recorded for you. We have a NED 3 program that we would use for that. The borough can review, they can access it, and there's really no need to change it from year to year because, we're not going to be harvesting trees unless the town decides to thin out an area, in which case we'll have different data that goes with that. Because as I said before, it might be that, looking for a long-term view of the forest, you may say, well, let's thin this area out to let it grow better in favor of a more diverse structured forest. So those are things that could be considered, long-term with the borough.
The other portion of the study was an inventory of all the street trees in town, including the school and amphitheater areas, the 2 triangles, the intersection of Spruce Lane and Clarksburg Road, and the cemetery. In other words, all the areas in white. Licensed tree expert Kevin Sebalia conducted this survey, which called for a somewhat different methodology. Instead of recording all of the trees and plants within a sample plot, his task was to enter in information about each street tree within 10 feet of the curb, as well as that of all the trees in the designated areas. In addition to the inventory, a risk assessment was to be done. To be included in the data, a tree had to be a minimum of 4 inches wide, 4.5 feet from the ground. If it wasn't, that street address was recorded as being a vacancy, meaning eligible for planting.
We're going to be collecting information on vacant planting spots, so we'll have an idea of how many planting spaces are available in Roosevelt, and that can help you in applying for grants for tree planting, and it also gives you an idea of where you stand as far as fully planting out the community in the public domain, in the public right-of-way.
Data is entered into a tablet.
The general information is going to be species, and then we have a category for land use, which is it going to be residential? Is it going to be a wooded roadway situation? Is it going to be the school, cemetery? We have a line for the address, so it's much easier to find a tree if I give you an address and tell you that that's one of 3 trees at the address, and I go A, B, C, and you know which way I'm collecting the data. So you could go, okay, C is the 3rd one down, and he's going with traffic, so I know that that's the tree. There's a comments section which can either help locate a tree, or it can further explain what the problem is with that tree or what action needs to be taken. So once we go to that, We have map coordinates, which we can get GPS on this. So the GPS coordinates will give you a XY coordinate that can be mapped, and you could also plug those coordinates into your phone and just go and find that location. Our next category is percentage of dieback in the crown, and this is done in 5% or 10% increments. And also in this category, if it's a dead tree, you can note that. So once you have the idea of the amount of dead branches in the tree, or whether it's totally dead, you would measure the diameter at breast height. By getting the diameter at breast height, know how far along the tree is in its growth, generally. Shorter stature trees tend to live shorter lives. So something like a dogwood tree or a Japanese flowering cherry, if you got 30 years out of them, that would be a good run for that tree. And then there's a category for management information. Here we can make recommendations whether to prune the tree, whether to remove the tree, whether the branches over the roadway need to be pruned back so that you essentially elevate the branches so that vehicles can get by, or again over the walkway so that people can get by. We can also note any sidewalk conflicts. If there's a heaved sidewalk or a broken sidewalk, there's a category for that. One of the things that I've been tasked to do is a tree risk assessment. One important thing to remember is that there is no such thing as a safe tree. Trees have potential energy, and every tree around us, every tree in the urban environment is going to fall down unless it is taken down under control using ropes. And the question becomes not whether you should remove the tree, but when you should remove the tree. So that's what we're going to be doing here, is determining which trees are in imminent danger of failure, and then prioritizing those as to what their actions should be. Other than the obvious standing dead tree, there are dead branches. There may be defects in the trunk where the trunk has got internal decay, and this is where it gets, you have to make a judgment call as to whether there's enough internal decay to support the mass that's above it. You come up with a risk assessment by looking at the part that you think is going to fail, where it's going to go, and what it's going to hit. Now, there are some trees that are massive and they're going to fail very soon, but they're going to fall into the woods. And they have zero hazard because you don't expect anyone to be in the woods when that falls. What I'm looking at here is that this stem has a very heavy lean over the playground. You can imagine if that catches a snow load or an ice load, it could come down, or it could come down. There's a tremendous amount of weight out there. The reason the tree is leaning like that is because it's shaded from behind. But this lower portion here, I am concerned that end piece could break out right over the playground. And that would be a disaster if someone were here. The data is going to be given to you in two forms. It's being collected in a program called iTree, which is publicly available and can be used by anyone for no charge. So it's going to be given to you in that form, and it's also going to be given to you as an Excel spreadsheet, which can be searched and filtered for practically anything you want to know. The iTree can generate reports which can give you an idea of how much carbon you're sequestering in the right-of-way in Roosevelt, and then there are different applications that you can generate reports on crown cover and where you rank in the state on other towns that have reported. It's just a very powerful tool with iTree, and there's many, many different facets of it. So that has a lot of potential for when you have a question that you want to ask of the data, maybe in the future that you haven't thought of now. So this is the first step. And then with all of the information that you have, you can correct problems that are existing, and you can plan for the future so that you have fewer problems in the future.
To better understand the following comments about trees by a variety of residents, this is an aerial view of the farmland that became Roosevelt.
And so as a landscape architect, you can see that the land was relatively flat. So, and it was open fields, and so they didn't have to grade or do much in the way of the manipulation of the topography, and the trees are left in the stream corridors and the wetland areas and then the high hills up above the factory. So the trees were always part of the landscape. Those trees would have formed the armature of the inner green belt for the town.
75 years later, the open fields between the stream corridors consist of treed streets with forested interior green spaces and a surrounding outer green belt.
The way they planned this community back in the 1930s was nothing short of brilliant in terms of not only leaving a lot of open space, but making sure that that open space formed a connected network that basically goes from one end of the community to the other and forms a backdrop, if not to everybody's house, probably a good 3/4 or more of the houses in Roosevelt back onto woods, like I'm fortunate to do. And in that open space, the thing that makes it distinctive is the fact that it's forest, that it's trees, that it is a natural, a diverse, rich, forested habitat. You're getting undergrowth, you're getting a variety of species, you're getting a natural habitat for birds and animals.
The open space, and in this particular case, the inner green belt, which is where most of the forested land is really important to the town. It should be maintained in perpetuity. You know, the town's historic designation was for the social history, the planning history, and the architecture. So the planning history is there. The trees are central to that planning history and the maintenance of that greenbelt town feel.
On a more personal note,
I mean, trees are an indispensable part of Roosevelt. I mean, and the fact that the original founders gave all of us, or most of us, this little piece of land behind our houses, you know, I think that was done with a more practical purpose, that people would have gardens, but still to have a little piece of land behind your house. I mean, this is, I'm not exaggerating by saying that this is our living room for 5 or 6 months, our backyard, and it goes right into the, you know, the green acres.
from a younger generation,
spent a lot of time in the woods in Roosevelt growing up. I feel like anytime after school, our favorite activity was to go out and just kind of explore a new part of the woods. I remember when I was there, like, our 4th grade teacher really made sure we were aware of how amazing of an area we lived in. We were constantly just exploring around, going in the little creeks around here, going in the Assunpink, trying to find different locations we haven't been to yet. So it kind of felt like an endless playground for us as a kid.
I think the value for the trees of the town is immeasurable. It was a farm community, you know, when the government began this community in 1936. And so the agricultural roots run long and deep. Roosevelt's known for its nature and its wildlife. Those trees house wildlife, the songs of the birds and the, you know, the nests. So it provides oxygen, it provides a habitat for wildlife, it provides shade, they're beautiful. How many times I've laid down on my grass and just looked up at the sun through the trees. I don't think there's anyone who grew up in Roosevelt, the kids, who didn't spend their summer days walking through the woods. Everyone walks through the woods. That's why, you know, the trails were put in so that you could walk more comfortably through the woods.
But trees are subject to various negative forces.
Well, there are several factors at play here, and one, of course, would be tree diseases that are coming in right now. which I'm sure you're talking about on the Environmental Commission. So, you know, we had the ash borer, we have the fire blight for the red oaks, and now we're going to lose the beech trees because of the nematodes. And so one of the things that will be interesting is how to monitor the forest and make sure that the species that will be retained. So in this case, I'm seeing I'm seeing hickories come into my backyard. The white oaks are fine. I'm seeing tulip poplars. Of course, we have the sweet gums, etc. So we want to be vigilant about what's going to come replace those trees that we are definitely going to lose. And we'll lose some really beautiful ones, particularly along the empty box stream corridor. So I think the town should be fairly vigilant. The Norway maples are reaching the end of their life expectancy. To remove them, and if, you know, replace them with a more appropriate species, and the same thing for the euonymus.
Or change by direct human action.
I began to ask people why they were taking down the trees, and they almost all said that they didn't want to rake, which was very hard for me to understand, but that was the most prevalent reason that people gave me. They didn't want to rake. So I'm watching tree after tree come down, and I spoke to the council and our municipal attorney, and I said, I think it's time to draft an ordinance making it more difficult for people to just come in and clear cut or cut down trees willy-nilly. You know, we've got to institute an ordinance that will at least put restrictions in place that if it's healthy and it's old and it's not in danger, you can't take it down. So that's when we very quickly put in an ordinance.
Or change by indirect human action.
I'm not an expert on this. Clearly, climate change changes everything. Now, we don't know how this is going to play out in the future, but certainly there are going to be maintenance challenges. It may get too hot for certain species. It may bring in other invasive species that may not be good for the balance of the area. It may bring in pests. You know, we're already seeing an increase in certain types of insect pests in the Northeast. It's getting warm enough for some species to be able successfully to winter over, which they never could before. So, I mean, there's no question there are going to be serious challenges. And of course, the thing is, and this is difficult, they're not going to be sudden, dramatic things that you can say, oh my God, we got to deal with this. It's going to be very slow, very gradual change. We won't notice anything until all of a sudden, you know, there it is, because it'll unfold over years and decades. But there's no question we're going to be seeing a lot of change over the next couple of decades.
Ellen Silverman, the chairman of the Roosevelt Environmental Commission, provides some summary comments.
This is a very important planning tool for the town and an educational tool for the town's people. Our trees are a wonderful resource. They grew up with the town. It was a field, and many of these trees are as old as the town is. There are a few a little older, but it's mostly of that size. It's a mature forest, and the resources is vast. It has helped all of the native plants that surround them and animals. So it is a great legacy, which needs to be protected. We're coming to a very challenging future where we have climate change that has affected the weather and the amount of rain we get. It has affected heat source. We now have longer periods of more extreme weather, and the trees can act as a buffer for that. One tree can hold 4,000 gallons worth of water. That would make a big difference when we have a deluge of rain, which we have had and will continue to have in the future. Why do we need this information? Can't we just leave them to maintain themselves? Trees are very resilient, and they'll work very hard for us, but there will be a tipping point if they don't get help. So we need to know what we have out there. We need to know how to improve our forest, and we need to just really acknowledge and enjoy them.
In addition to their other benefits, for decades, trees have provided an attractive setting.
First I thought I would tell you to travel the other way.
Raise your arms and lower, and ward off left.
So the study is important for the knowledge, but the information going out to the residents of Roosevelt is also very important, because the more we know something, the more we'll protect it. We had 2 different consultant firms to handle this study. One was for the street tree, and that is something all the residents see, is the trees in front of their houses, the trees in front of their neighbors' houses. That's a group that you want to keep very resilient. You want to keep that up. It's not only important for the environmental factors, but it can have a strong effect on your quality of life and the value of your home is a healthy street tree. The other one is the study of our wooded open space areas. And that was done by a forester group. It was a specialized study. It's more of a generalized what is out there. Yes, it's somewhat about the condition, but it's more generally like a plot of land. The advantage, though, of knowing this information is now we can plan to further protect what we have.
Change is constant, even if imperceptibly slow, as from forest to farms to treed community. Good stewardship of the land requires knowledge of it, hence the need for and the value of this study.